coming up on Tempered.
I think we probably did about 2.5 to 3 years of ongoing, treatment. 2 surgeries. For us, we didn't feel comfortable with IVF and we'd already been through so much treatment that was kind of our stopping point and where we knew we were going to take a different path towards adoption. I didn't allow myself at church to be vulnerable about it or to open up about it because for some reason at that time in my life I felt really private and probably even a little prideful and shouldn't have. When families are raising adopted or foster children, that's going to look different.
These children have not had structure.
Right.
And discipline.
Or they've been physically abused.
Oh, yeah. Do you think all Christians should feel some kind of sense of responsibility for these children?
I do.
Yes.
That's what the Bible tells us.
Hello, and welcome to Tempered, a show where we will share the experiences of Christian women who have faced hardship and emerged stronger. I am Jenny Cochran, your host. Tempered can be defined as softened or moderated or seasoned to bring to a proper or desired state. In our show, we will deal with many topics that may affect Christian women in the 21st century, topics that can change us, temper us, bring us to a new place spiritually. Welcome to Tempered. I hope you will enjoy our show. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
This is a special treat for me. I have been through this journey with you as your mom. And so we thank you for coming and being willing to share your story and encourage other women who are dealing with the same things. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your husband, your careers.
Okay. So I'm married to Drew Kaiser. He's a gospel preacher in Leeds, Alabama, which is about 10 minutes outside of the Birmingham area. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary there, working there. We've been married 26 years. We met at Freed Hardeman as students, and then shortly after we were married, maybe not even a year and a half later, we moved to Leeds for him to be the pulpit minister there, and we've been there ever since.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And your children, you have 2 children?
So we have 2 children. Ava, she's 19, and she's a freshman at Freed Hardeman University, and then Jackson is a freshman in high school.
And you knew right away you wanted a family. Well, a few years. Something wasn't working. When did you begin to think, oh, this isn't working like it's supposed to? Something's not going right. Yeah. So,
I had always had issues, with my reproductive system from a young age as even a teenager.
Yeah.
A lot of pain, each month with each cycle. And I think I knew then that something wasn't right, but it never crossed my mind that this could cause infertility. I just knew how painful it was each month, and how sick it would make me at times, or, having to miss a day of school here and there just because of the level of the pain. But then in my early adult years, when I would go for yearly visits with the doctor, she had even mentioned before we were ready to start a family, she said, when you get to that point, we might need to help you, but she kind of downplayed it and didn't act like it was going to be a big deal. It didn't really hit me until we were in the midst of it. And
So did you go through some infertility treatments, hormones, surgeries?
All of the above.
All of the above, yes.
I think I had 2 surgeries, what they call exploratory or laparoscopy surgeries where they kind of were trying to clean things up to make, things more healthy for conception or for a baby. I also did a lot of hormone medications, and I think we probably did about 2.5 to 3 years of ongoing, treatment. But we had decided ourselves, Drew and I had decided that once it got to the point where the infertility doctor we were working with started suggesting IVF, that was going to kind of be our answer,
Our path
from God, that we were going to take a different path towards adoption. We didn't feel comfortable for us, we didn't feel comfortable with IVF and we'd already been through so much treatment that was kind of our stopping point, and where we knew we were going to take a different path towards adoption.
IVF, there was ethical issues possibly for you and Drew, and so you knew that wasn't the route you wanted to take.
Right.
So,
we have a lot of friends that have done it, and I would never want to judge anyone else for doing it, but it just wasn't right for us. We just didn't feel like that was the right thing for us.
So there were sorrows, there were unknowns, there were struggles, there was fears.
Of course, you and Dad were always very supportive, and I never felt, the pressure of where's our grandchildren, or Good. And Drew's parents were very supportive, and never really pressured us in that way, and were always supportive. To be honest, within our congregation at Asheville Road, I had 1 or 2 ladies that were a little older than me that I would talk to about it, but I didn't allow myself at church to be vulnerable about it or to open up about it, because for some reason at that time in my life I felt really private and probably even a little prideful, and shouldn't have, but there was at least 1 or 2 other women going through it too, and while we knew each other was going through it, and at some point we became more supportive of each other, in the beginning I didn't want that, and so I felt very guarded at church. But at work, I had a friend that on days when I would have to come back to the hospital where I worked, having just learned that the pregnancy test was negative, I had a really sweet friend that would say, let's go eat lunch, or she would just come and sit with me.
That's great.
Yeah. And then I had a few friends from college that I was still in touch with that, would send encouraging. We didn't have texting then.
No, we didn't have those cell phones.
They would send encouraging cards, or little letters in the mail, or just call and check on me. Yeah. And then Drew's just always, he never made it an issue. He was always just right there with me, and never made me feel, shame, or made me feel like he was frustrated, or,
So he was a blessing. Did this draw you closer in your marriage, or sometimes were the difficulties just so overwhelming?
Yeah,
Or
I would say we grew closer through all of that. It wasn't a source of arguing or fighting or tension.
you leaned on each other.
Yeah, and we just would, take extra trips together. I can remember taking, an impromptu trip to the beach or something, or there was a short time where, it was especially difficult that we would go to breakfast at Cracker Barrel every morning before we both had to go to work, just because we were both, I think we both were sitting in it together, but not, blaming each other or angry about it, because it wasn't anyone's fault, it was just.
Life is hard. It was just life taking its course.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, How did you and Drew come to the decision, let's start pursuing adoption?
We probably did 3 or 4 rounds of what was called an IUI. It's just a form of infertility treatment. And when the doctor, we had even discussed, I think, while we were waiting to hear about that result, we had said, okay, if this is it, because I think the doctor must have told me right before that, if this one doesn't work, I think it's probably going to be time for you to go on to a bigger clinic that can do IVF. And so, we'd already had that discussion that's when we'll call Agape and start the adoption process.
So tell us about Agape.
Yeah, so Agape is a organization affiliated with the Churches of Christ. They have a couple of different offices, or several offices around the state of Alabama. I know there's one in Georgia. They're a really good organization, and there was a office housed in the Birmingham area that we called that social worker, and she helped us get the ball
That's
started.
how you started. Agape. I remember you taking classes through Agape. You and Drew drove once a week to Huntsville to take a class.
Yeah, it was a parenting class, specifically parenting children who have been adopted or are in the foster care system. There were also couples in there that were taking the class for the purpose of becoming foster parents, because it's a different, you have to discipline children in the foster care system a little differently than, biological children or even adopted children, So, there was things like that we needed to learn how to navigate with our kids.
Sure.
So we got Ava when she was 1 week old. We actually learned about her the day she was born, and we were able to get a picture of her that day. And I can remember sitting at some friends' houses. We didn't have a computer at our house for some reason at that point, but we went to our friend's house and pulled up her picture. It was dial-up internet at the time, so it came up very slowly, but we got to see a picture of her that night, and we got to talk to the social worker. And then when she went to stay with a foster parent for just a few nights, that's what Agape recommends, is that they stay with a foster family or a foster mother until the time that the birth mother can change her mind has lapsed, so that we didn't have her with us getting attached to her. But then, because sometimes it happens where the birth mother might change her mind, and within those first 5 days, she can change her mind without any question.
Okay.
So Ava stayed with an older foster mother for a few days, but we got to talk to her every day.
Oh,
and,
great.
Yeah, so we got to hear how Ava was doing. And so when she was a week old, she came home with us. And then Jackson's story was a little different. They were both born in South Alabama, so we didn't have to leave the state or anything. But Jackson was 2 weeks old when we were able to go get him. It took a little bit longer for the social workers to find his birth father to, because the birth parents, have to relinquish their rights as parents, and took a little bit longer with Jackson for that. But we were able to bring him home at 2 weeks
2
old.
weeks. So they were both tiny. They were both
Very
newborns.
tiny. Yeah.
So now they're older. Ava's 19. Jackson is 15. So how has their relationships in your family evolved?
Yeah. I mean,
Normal?
normal.
Just like kids?
Yeah, just like kids. We've always tried to make adoption part of our daily conversation.
So they've always known.
Especially when they were little, we read books about being adopted. We talked about being adopted so that it was part of their vocabulary, and so that they didn't have some big revealing, at some age that left them feeling confused or anything. We just wanted them to always know that and know how special they are and how, how God was working in their lives to bring them to us, and, and how their birth parents, loved them very much and would have loved to have raised them, but knew that at that time they weren't
in a place
to do that, and that, they chose us to do that. We tried to communicate that with them as much as possible so that, it always just felt like part of their lives. As they got older, they didn't ask as many questions about it, but just this last year, or the fall of 24, Ava asked about reaching out to her birth parents, and they're not together, but the birth mother was the first one she reached out to. So she has developed a relationship with her, and that has been a positive thing.
Did she get to meet the birth father?
Not
Not
yet,
yet? Okay.
but she has talked with him a little bit.
Okay.
It just didn't work out yet when she was down there for a visit, but yeah, maybe she will get to someday.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
I remember one, I wasn't there, but you shared it with me. You all were cleaning the front porch with water hose and buckets of soap and spraying water. And Ava was, if I remember, about 6, maybe.
Okay.
Jackson, do you even know what I'm about to say?
Trying to remember this.
I'm going to tell this story.
Okay.
So Ava was about 6, 6.5. Jackson was 2-ish. And y'all they were soaking wet. Her hair, in this little picture I have, her hair's wet. And water fights and soap.
Yeah.
And she was laughing her head off, you said. And Jackson was laughing and giggling. And all of a sudden she just blurted out, "I'm so glad I got adopted by you all." Do you remember that?
Wow.
I have cherished that and carried that in my heart all these years.
Wow.
Do you even remember that? It's not something that...
I mean, I remember a time vaguely of her saying that.
Yeah.
I didn't remember all the things surrounding it, but yeah.
Well, you called me and you told me that.
Yeah.
And I have cherished that moment. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But it became a part of my heart. And it said something about her. It said something to me about how she was being raised, that she knows where she came from, that she knows she is a part of your family through adoption. And at a young age, it just made a big statement to me. So...
Thank you for reminding me.
Telling you about that story, okay.
Yeah.
James 1:27, pure religion undefiled, is caring for the widows and the fatherless. Do you think all Christians should feel some kind of sense of responsibility for these children who are fatherless or who are in foster care? Or
I do.
yes,
That's what the Bible tells us.
yes.
Now, do I think every family should bring a foster child into their home or adopt children if it's not the right thing for them, or but there's other ways to help too. There's ways of supporting members in your church who are doing that, or there's ways to support financially the organizations like Agape or Child Haven, which is the organization we are licensed through for the foster parenting.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Agape does foster parenting too. So there's lots of ways to do it without, if they're not in a season of life to bring a child or children into their homes. I think it's still supposed to be something that we're all thinking about and trying to find ways
we all pray for and
to
support.
help. Yeah.
Okay. How is fostering? You've done both now, adoption and fostering. How is fostering different from adoption?
Well, for one thing, it's temporary. There always is the option of fostering towards adoption, but the state's primary goal is to reunify the children with their parents.
With their
so
birth parents.
we have to go into it knowing it's temporary and that we're providing a home, a safe home, a loving home for now, for this season of their lives. And I think having that mindset helps, because it's very easy to get attached to these children, quickly. And, but then also on days when the behaviors are very challenging, it helps us to remind ourselves that we are doing this now for this season of their lives, until they are able to be reunified. And it doesn't always happen. And then they are then adoption can be an option too. But I don't think it's always healthy to go into it with that mindset, because that's not the initial goal for the foster care system or the state.
Matthew 18:5 says, whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. That's how God looks at us caring for children that need our care. Romans 8:14 talks about our adoption by God. It says, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage or slavery to go back to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption. So we are adopted by God. I'm a Gentile. I was never Jewish and part of his chosen people.
Right.
But I have been adopted by God. And he says in 2 Corinthians 6:18, I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord God Almighty.
That's always something that we've tried to remind Ava and Jackson, that we're adopted too, just to help them, not feel alone. We were also blessed with several families at our congregation who also adopted. So they've had friends growing up who have had similar stories. And
yes, that's always great. They have others to connect to and share that with. Do you think the church can do a better job of supporting? And if so, how? You've already said support Child Haven and these places who are where children's homes are located, and
our children, all the children in our congregation who have been adopted are just, as they should be, just treated, as the children that are born biologically. They're just welcomed with loving arms. Even the little foster child that we've had since the end of January, she safely prances around that church building knowing who she can go to and who is safe for her. I mean, she's safe with anyone there, but, she's already gone and, learned who's going to let her sit with them or who will be so kind to her. And, I just think it's important for churches to keep that in mind, and to remember that, again, when families are raising adopted or foster children, that's going to look different, especially with a foster child. Discipline and parenting can look different, and not be judgmental or get, frustrated if, if you see a parent disciplining or not disciplining a foster child that might need that, but they can't do that in a certain, in that way at that.
I see.
Because,
Many times these children have not had structure
right.
and discipline.
Or they've been physically abused.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so, as foster parents, we can't spank and foster. So it takes a lot more creative discipline.
Sure.
And so it's important just to help support them without giving opinions or judgment about,
Sure.
how to raise or parent children like that.
If someone has been through infertility and don't know where, nothing is working out and they don't know where to go next, is there some steps you would advise, the first steps? How can they get the information they need, or how can they get started on gathering that information so that they can see if that's a path for them?
I feel like it's a pretty easy process. If a couple is at that place and has prayed about it together, and that's where they, feel they're being led to do, in terms of starting a family, the first thing I would suggest is give Agape a call. They can help answer questions. They can even in the beginning offer some counseling to make sure that that's where the couple, that the couple's kind of both on the same page about it, and can help them kind of start navigating that process. They're very helpful. Or Child Haven, if they want to do foster parenting, they could call Child Haven. They're in Coleman, Alabama. But around the Tennessee and Georgia area, I know there's Agape here, and other probably children's homes in close to Chattanooga, I would think, that they could call.
We have a Child and Family Services here in Chattanooga, and if that's not the direction they would handle, they would put people in with the right. They could give names and phone numbers and contact information for others. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Your
for having
story
me.
is one of sacrificial love.
When we can take what's happened to us and help others with it, that's what gives it meaning and purpose in our lives.
And Jesus shines in you. So thanks for sharing. There are others, women out there who are going through right now, maybe what you have been through, and your words are encouraging, and your words give guidance and experience to them. So thank you for being here and sharing all this with us, and God bless you both.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.